With that being said, you big dummies, you getting paid now.
Right.
Everybody now has an opportunity to pull up their chair and have a...
For the past year, Cheryl has relentlessly targeted Caitlin Clark with bizarre accusations claiming she's a 25-year-old competing against teenagers, downplaying her rookie season and insisting no one wants to play with her. The criticism felt never-ending. Then Cheryl Miller entered the conversation.
They will recognize, her game, but they won't recognize her impact.
Right.
How can you separate the two? It's kind of
hard,
right?
I used, Jax, you're absolutely right. And I was like, come on, you big dummy.
The basketball legend and former Clark coach just delivered a knockout blow on All the Smoke, podcast calling Swoopes a big dummy and tearing apart the false narratives. Miller didn't just set the record straight. Her defense of Caitlin Clark also hinted at something surprising about the future of the Indiana Fever, leaving fans buzzing with excitement.
Thank you for making time. Welcome to the show, Cheryl Miller.
Before we dive into everything, Miller said, "Have you ever wondered why a basketball legend seems so determined to tear down the WNBA's brightest rising star? Let's break down Sheryl Swoopes' relentless campaign against Caitlin Clark from her college days to her rookie season and uncover what's really going on." It all started with Swoopes making wildly inaccurate claims about Clark's college.
Let's also talk about how much more experience that gives you over other players coming in, right? So people say, dang, like he or she's killing them, but you have a 25-year-old playing against a 20-year-old.
Career in perhaps her most outrageous statement. She insisted Clark was a 25-year-old competing against 20-year-olds at Iowa. The reality: Clark was just 22, playing in her fourth year just like countless other college seniors. When called out on this falsehood, Swoopes backpedaled, claiming it was merely hyperbole tied to COVID. Eligibility rules a week excuse that didn't hold up, but Swoopes was just getting started. She went on to claim that Clark took 40 shots.
Clark right now probably takes about 40 shots a game.
Here we go.
I know you like that.
Hell yeah.
I said that because when she comes to the league, regardless of what team she goes to that has vets on that team, she probably ain't gonna get 40
per game, portraying her as a selfish volume shooter. It's the reality. Clark averaged just 22.7 shots per game. The irony here is hard to ignore. Swoopes herself averaged 19.2 shots per game during her senior year, only 3 fewer than Clark. Talk about throwing stones from a glass house. When Clark was closing in on the all-time NCAA scoring record, Swoopes shifted tactics, questioning the legitimacy of the achievement.
Bring back Caitlin. If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that player set it.
Okay.
Right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year, and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record?
She argued that for the record to truly count, Clark had to break it within the same time frame as the previous record holder, Kelsey Plum. If you're going to break a record, for me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that player set it, right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broken that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record? Asterisk, this claim was completely false. Clark shattered the record in 4 years, the same as any other college player. Swoopes conveniently ignored the fact that Clark could have used the COVID eligibility rule for a 5th year, but chose not to. Instead, entering the WNBA, Swoopes also boldly predicted that Clark wouldn't dominate in the league. Yet, as Clark started breaking rookie assist records and establishing herself as one of the WNBA's premier playmakers, Swoopes suddenly went silent. The numbers spoke for themselves. Clark finished her rookie season averaging 19.2 points and a league-leading 8.4 assists per game, silencing the doubters and securing Rookie of the Year honors. I didn't say she wouldn't be good. What? I said was I didn't think Caitlin or Angel would come into the league and dominate immediately, which I don't think either of them did, respectfully. But let's be real, by any definition, Clark's performance was dominant. Leading the league in assists while averaging nearly 20 points per game is undeniable proof. To claim otherwise would require a completely new definition of dominance, perhaps. The most telling moment came when Swoopes appeared on Angel Reese's podcast. On Angel Reese's podcast, Swoopes continued to undermine Clark while insisting she had no personal issue with her, a classic case of saying one thing while doing another. I've known Sheryl since she was in college. I helped with her Nike shoe deal in 1993 and took her to her first ESPYs. I've coached her. I respect her. But when Caitlin broke Maravich's record, her comments were everywhere claiming Caitlin was 25, a fifth-year senior, taking 40 shots per game, and that her records were illegitimate. Asterisk, the basketball world took notice of this pattern, and eventually, Swoopes was removed from broadcasting a Fever game. She was replaced by Nancy Lieberman, who didn't hesitate to call out the misinformation surrounding Clark. I got off the treadmill and called her as a friend. I said, "You can have your opinion, but you have to get the statistics right. Facts matter. Admit you got the numbers wrong, and this thing is over. People will respect you." But she got upset with me. I wasn't trying to hurt her, just talking. Our relationship pretty much over at this point. I tried to speak to her at the Final Four, but she didn't want to talk. My life will be great with or without Sheryl Swoopes. Asterisk. The basketball world had been waiting for someone with real credibility to step into the Caitlin Clark conversation. That moment finally arrived when Cheryl Miller walked into the All the Smoke Asterisk podcast studio and absolutely lit up the critics. What happens when a basketball legend who's actually coached Clark decides she's had enough of the nonsense? You get one of the most authentic defenses women's basketball has seen. The studio erupted. But Miller was just getting started. She defended Clark's work ethic with the passion of someone who had seen it firsthand. This wasn't just another talking head weighing in. This was Cheryl Miller, one of the greatest to ever play the game, directly calling out the hypocrisy surrounding Clark. Look, as much as she was given, you can't tell me that if the door swung the other way and she didn't live up to the hype, folks wouldn't still be waiting for her to fail. Exactly. So with that being said, you big dummies, you're getting paid now. Asterisk, it's the uncomfortable truth Clark's critics don't want to admit. Her presence has elevated the entire league, including the paychecks of those criticizing. Her, Miller, who coached Clark in the 2024 WNBA All-Star Game, had a front row seat to evaluate her beyond the highlight reels. What she discovered surprised even her. Best coaching job ever. Being around Caitlin, seeing her love for the game, it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her. I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a black woman and hated because of my color. Asterisk Miller's defense carried weight because she wasn't speaking from speculation, she was speaking from experience. She had seen Clark's confidence up close, and she understood how narratives could be shaped by the media. I can't imagine what this young lady is going through. And yeah, she brought some of it on herself. She's cocky, but for good reason. She's confident, and I love that about her. But watching the way the media spun things, they had their narrative. Asterisk Miller didn't just defend Clark, she exposed the deeper truth about how narratives in sports are shaped.